Hello, and welcome to the latest episode, where this time around we aren't so much going under the radar as heading down a rabbit hole, and re-emerging with a psychedelic indie rock classic recorded by the often derided but vastly underrated second incarnation of one of Liverpool's most revered cult bands. Titled Reverberation, the album became the sixth official full-length LP released by Echo and the Bunnymen, but unlike the band's first 5 albums, it never made an impact on the charts. In fact, it vanished almost as soon as it appeared in November 1990, suffering a critical mauling before skulking off into the wilderness. To the uninitiated, it seems bizarre that such a fate could befall a record which essentially followed up an album that had taken its creators to the cusp of major international recognition. However, the original Bunnymen lineup that made that record, 1987's Echo and the Bunnymen, had acrimoniously split the following year, with vocalist Ian McCulloch leaving to embark on a solo career. Bearing in mind McCulloch was one of the most charismatic frontmen of his generation, this left the remaining band members in a quandary. Guitarist Will Sargent, bassist Les Pattinson, and drummer Pete DeFreitas had all made substantial contributions to the band, but for the wider record-buying public, McCulloch simply was the Bunnymen, the iconic haystack-haired frontman who delivered the band's signature 80s hits such as The Cutter, Seven Seas, and The Glorious The Killing Moon. At this point, most bands would probably have thrown in the towel, but the Bunnymen were never like most bands. Instead, Sargent, Pattinson and DeFreitas kept going, retaining the band's name and recruiting a new vocalist and lyricist in Noel Burke. Originally hailing from Belfast, Burke had already recorded one lost classic, Love Me, Love My Dogma, for Liverpool's Probe Plus Records with the excellent but unsung St. Vitus Dance. However, things got even darker before the recording of Reverberation, when Pete DeFreitas was tragically killed in a motorcycle crash during June 1989, aged just 27. His bandmates were devastated but still elected to continue. Future spiritualised drummer Damon Reese replaced Pete behind the kit, and the new lineup was completed with the band's longtime live keyboard player Jake Brockman becoming their fully fledged 5th member. Choosing to reintroduce themselves in low-key fashion, the reconfigured Bunnymen returned to live action with a series of gigs for local charities at the Marsh Lane Community Centre in Bootle, Liverpool in March 1990. Media interest was rife for these shows, and the Bunnymen proved they were still a force to be reckoned with, playing several impressive shows combining both old and freshly penned material. Unsurprisingly though, Ian McCulloch was less than enamoured. He referred to his former bandmates as Echo and the Bogus Men, and made withering comparisons between the new lineup and has-been acts such as the Swinging Blue Jeans. However, at least initially, the band's label, Warner Music, kept the faith, partnering the new-look Bunnymen with producer Geoff Emerick for the recording of the Reverberation album at Ridge Farm Studios in Surrey. Most serious music fans will likely know Geoff Emerick for his work as George Martin's chief engineer on several of the Beatles' most groundbreaking albums, including Revolver and Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Pairing him with the Bunnymen proved to be a smart move too, for Reverberation brought out the best in both parties. Copying its name from the 13th Floor Elevators tune of the same name, Reverberation captures the Bunnymen at their most overtly psychedelic, and that's no bad thing. With Geoff Emerick's encouragement, they made tape loops and embellished the standard rock instrumentation with the likes of mellotrons, sitars and tablas, duly creating a record long on ambition and highly cinematic in scope. Importantly, it was also entirely devoid of duff tracks. Its trippy dance floor friendly trailer single, Enlighten Me, was an obvious highlight, though strident rockers such as Cut and Dried and the defiant False Goodbyes weren't far behind. The record's tracklist also included a couple of exquisite ballads courtesy of Thick Skinned World and the haunting Flaming Red, while King of Your Castle's vividly observed portrayal of domestic violence revealed that Noel Burke wasn't just an adept and erudite lyricist. In fact, he was very much his own man and anything but a McCulloch clone. Sadly though, while Reverberation was a classy comeback, the decision to release it as an Echo and the Bunnymen album backfired on the band. Warner Music had been supportive until it was released, but when most of the reviewers refused to accept the band as a going concern without Ian McCulloch, they quickly pulled the plug, dropping the Bunnymen while they were on tour in support of the record. Nonetheless, the Bunnymen still soldiered on. They formed their own label and released a couple more excellent overlooked singles, Prove Me Wrong and Inside Me, Inside You, and even toured the US. By 1993, though, the law of diminishing returns kicked in and the band split, albeit this time without any acrimony. There would be a rapprochement, of course. Indeed, by 1994, Will Sargent was again playing with Ian McCulloch in Electrofiction, and 3 years later, with Les Pattinson again back in the fold, Echo and the Bunnymen staged a successful return to the fray with the album Evergreen. None of this has helped Reverberation slough off its poor reputation, but in recent times it's finally begun to bag some long overdue kudos, a situation that's been exacerbated by Noel Burke and St Vitus Dance performing it live to celebrate its 35th anniversary at triumphant shows in England, Scotland and Northern Ireland. Happily, you can still hear Reverberation in full on YouTube and Spotify too, and I'd urge you to do so, for when you do check it out, you'll have the pleasure of discovering a record that would surely have established itself as a bona fide psych pop classic had it been issued under any other name. So that's all for this episode of Under the Radar, but when we return, we'll be back on Merseyside to reappraise a lesser celebrated new wave era classic from a band formed by a key member of a trailblazing pre-punk outfit.